This is probably one of the worst video quality reviews, and this review is coming the day after I reviewed Oppenheimer. And having watched this movie just now, I feel like Steven Spielberg would have done a better job telling the story with his directorial style. I really love the way he does his camera shots. As we are now going to review, by we, I mean me, 2002 Steven Spielberg directed Catch Me If You Can, which sent me down a huge rabbit hole about the man who is Frank Abagnale Jr. So this movie dates back all the way to a 1980 autobiography of the real-life guy, Frank Abagnale Jr., which this movie is loosely, and I say loosely, based off of, because there's a lot of creative liberties in this movie. And then at the end of the day, we'll get into the discussion of the guy himself, which was very disappointing. So let's get right into it. He appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in 1978, and Carson was captivated by Abagnale Jr. and even held him over through the commercial break to keep talking to him and interviewing him about his fascinating life as a teenage con artist and bank fraud bad check writer. And Norman Lear bought the rights to make it a movie 2 years later in 1980, and then over the next 20 years, it went through various hands of ownership. At one point, David Fincher was attached to direct it, and then Gore Verbinski, and he had cast everybody and was pretty much going to shoot it with Leonardo DiCaprio to star as he would end up starring, but then he ended up going and shooting Gangs of New York, so then Verbinski left the project. Yeah, so this movie ended up going to DreamWorks, and then Spielberg got it, and he did an excellent job. This movie cost $52 million to make, and a reason why I think that Spielberg would have done better, his attention to detail with authenticity of a time period is just, it's pretty much unmatched. I can't think of any historical inaccuracies of any of his period films. They are just above board. And this movie, it just has that classic Spielberg feel on how he shoots his films. It kind of reminisces even his more recent film The Fabelmans. The filming of that and this movie kind of felt very similar. Like I said, $52 million budget. This movie's 141 minutes runtime. I felt like that was enough. It wasn't too much where I was getting fatigued. And Tom Hanks plays the FBI director. Leonardo DiCaprio once again plays Frank Abagnale Jr. This movie came out Christmas Day, 2002. I would have been 15 years old at the time. I did not see this movie in theaters. It's rated PG-13. My mom would have never, well, maybe she would have, I don't know. Who knows? I can't think back into the past and think it wouldn't. So anyway, it made $352 million at the box office. It was a commercial success, high scoring, Rotten Tomatoes, 96%, IMDb, 8.1 out of 10. Google users are 87%, and yours truly, I love this movie. I am 5 out of 5. Highly enjoyable. It was nominated for a couple of Academy Awards, didn't win any. John Williams got a nomination for Original Score. Christopher Walken got a nomination for Best Supporting Actor. This is what you call a fun movie, and you can check out that original interview with the real Frank Abagnale Jr. from Johnny Carson. It's on YouTube. And what else would I want to say? So Spielberg didn't even contact Abagnale Jr. and just kind of made the movie based off the book. But Abagnale would later say that he felt like Spielberg was the perfect person to capture his life, although there were many creative liberties taken. And that's where we will stop talking about the movie and we will talk about the guy, because my wife had the autobiography of the guy, Frank Abagnale Jr., and in the years of technology, this guy was supposedly cashing $4 million in fraudulent checks from all these big corporations and pretending to be a doctor for a year, pretending to be a lawyer for a year. And with the advent of technology and shared resources, investigative journalists have debunked pretty much all of his autobiographical claims of being this great con artist. If anything, he's nothing but a small-time crook, still conning people to this day, from what I've read on Wikipedia. Everyone dug deep into this guy in the 2000s after the movie came out. And even as recently as 1978, his timelines never matched. He said he was doing one thing at this point in time when he was still in prison. He claimed that he was only in prison for a particular amount of time and then got released to go be working for the FBI as their main check and bank fraud guy. Apparently, he gets paid millions of dollars a year by big corporations to ensure that paper bank fraud doesn't take place. None of that's true from what I've read. He's filed for bankruptcy a couple of times, has very little assets. It was very disappointing to read all this stuff about the real guy. To this day, he claims that he works for the FBI, although they say that they never really have any more but a very general. They've used him once or twice. He doesn't have this long-term working relationship. And a lot of universities are no longer asking him to speak. And even Google had all these Google Talks with him, and now they have disabled all comments on YouTube about it because this guy is apparently was a con man, and is just continuing to play this long con and spun this whole story, which is a cool story, but the whole cashing bad checks for Pan Am, traveling all over the world, millions of dollars, bilking big corporations. Apparently none of that's true. He was a small-time guy dealing in thousands of dollars, not millions, not really dealing with big corporations on a regular basis. He was mostly ripping off people that he knew personally, and he was in and out of prison multiple times. He was allegedly cashing bad checks well into the late 70s when he claimed that he had been reformed and working for the FBI as an ethics guy. And it was just really disappointing because I had always thought this movie was very factual based off of the biography. And as of 2021, most of this stuff has been disproven, and this guy's just a total con man. I was crushed because I always had this vision of him in my mind as this reformed guy who did all this good, but he really doesn't. He just peddles this lie, and people had believed it. But now, like I mentioned, with the advent of technology, it's very easy to go on Google and make a phone call. Hey, was he here then? Federal Prison Bureau, he said he escaped and he was the only guy. FBI, he said he was the top 10 youngest guy to ever be on the top 10 most wanted. None of that was true. And it was very disheartening for me to hear it, especially after getting all juiced up watching this movie, which I will say, as a movie just in general, it's great. But now that I have to disassociate the fact that this guy is a total con artist in my mind, and it's hard because I always had this view of who Frank Abagnale Jr. was. Sometimes reality is not what you think it is, folks. I guess the moral of the story is, based on a true story is based. It's not really the real thing. And we always don't really know people. People can put themselves on to be a certain person and misrepresent themselves so that you think that there's something that they're not. Just be yourself. Why lie? There's no need to lie. Just be honest. You think of George Costanza. He's just a very insecure guy, and he's always making up these things. I'm Art Vandelay. I work for Vandelay Industries. I'm an architect. And he's like, it's all about creating this persona of how people want to perceive him. But none of it's real. He's just some guy that lives with his parents in Queens. Some bald guy. And the same thing with this Frank Abagnale Jr. I think he wanted to build himself up to be something that he was not, to create this name for himself, but he didn't need to. Until next time, we'll see you then.